You remember, a couple of nights ago on CNN, there's a 2-hour town hall. And this town hall special was specifically designed to make gun owners, members of the NRA, Second Amendment advocates, feel as though they were morally inferior, as though these people were somehow responsible for the horrors of what had happened inside that school over in Parkland, Florida. And all of that was nonsense, of course. The sheriff of Broward County, Scott Israel, did this beating of his chest and this wailing and gnashing of teeth, blaming the NRA and the availability of AR-15s. Well, now we know exactly why this shooting happened. And it happened because authorities failed on every single level. All of them. It wasn't just the FBI got 2 calls and did nothing. It wasn't just that the Broward County Sheriff's Office received 39 separate calls to this piece of crap's home over the course of 7 years. It wasn't just that. Now we have even more information. You ready for this? I mean, you want to talk bombshells? Here are the bombshells. On Thursday night, the American public learned that Broward County Sheriff's Office was told in November that the Parkland shooter, quote, could be a school shooter in the making, but deputies didn't bother to write up a report. That report came just weeks after a relative called urging the BSO, the Broward County Sheriff's Office, to seize his weapons. Then, here's the even more shocking news. We learned that an armed school resource officer, this one's just mind-boggling, an armed school resource officer at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School sat outside and waited for 4 minutes. The entire shooting episode was 6 minutes. The Broward County deputy was outside, heard the shots, waited outside with his gun for 4 minutes, and did not enter the school. Okay, that attack ended with 17 dead people, including at least a dozen dead kids. And the Broward County Sheriff's deputy, whose job it was, he's the armed school officer. It is his job to rush that guy. He sat outside and he didn't do anything. He sat outside and did nothing. We also know, by the way, that the school's security mechanism was tape delayed. So whatever they were seeing on the cameras was 20 minutes, running 20 minutes behind. So this guy was sitting outside, but apparently he heard the gunshots and he did nothing. Even the Broward County Sheriff himself, Steve Israel, acknowledged this yesterday in a press conference. Shocking stuff. Here is what Israel had to say.
Peterson was absolutely on campus through this entire event. He was armed. He was in uniform. But what I saw was a deputy arrive at the west side of Building 12, take up a position, and he never went in.
Okay, this guy sat outside and he did not go in. Now, a lot of people today on the left are doing this because they want to make this about the guns and not about the fact that there was an armed officer there who did nothing. Instead, because they want to make it about the availability of weapons, they say, well, can you blame him? This guy not charging? Yes, I can blame him. And I don't have to be a police officer or a soldier to blame him. I wasn't in that situation. I also didn't volunteer to become an employee of the Broward County Sheriff's Office and become an armed school officer. That is this guy's only job. You had one job, and when time came, you cowered. And it wasn't just that, okay? Are you ready for this? This gets even worse. This gets significantly worse. This is breaking in the last 15 minutes. CNN reporting, quote, when Coral Springs police officers, this is a different district, when Coral Springs police officers arrived at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida on February 14th, in the midst of the school shooting crisis, many officers were surprised to find not only that Broward County Sheriff's Deputy Scott Peterson, the armed school resource officer, had not entered the building, but that 3 other Broward County Sheriff's deputies were also outside the school and had not entered. The deputies had their pistols drawn and they were behind their vehicles, the sources said, and not one of them had gone into the school. So while this monster was roaming classroom to classroom with his rifle, mowing down students, 4 deputies, 4 armed, uniformed deputies were sitting outside. They didn't get in there to try and save the kids. They didn't get there to try and rescue the kids after the kids had been shot. They waited for an entirely new police department to get there and go inside. There's something fishy going on here, folks. There's something going on here because I promise you, when people sign up to be sheriff's deputies, they're not doing so thinking that they're going to cower behind a car. They're doing so thinking that they want to help save people. So there is something going on. And this thing, Steve Israel knows the answer, and he ain't telling us. Steve Israel, this sheriff, he knows exactly what happened here, and he is not telling us. There's a rumor online that I hesitate to report because I don't know that it's well substantiated. This has more to do with sheriff's policy than anything else. But we're going to find out because something happened here where 4 deputies were sitting outside with their guns drawn and a monster inside massacring children, and they didn't go inside. Are you going to tell me that's the NRA's fault? You're going to tell me that's Dana Lash's fault? You're going to tell me that's my fault living in Los Angeles with my guns in my safe? You're going to tell me that's the fault of 100 million gun owners who weren't there, many of whom would have rushed the shooter and tried to do something, just like what happened in the Texas church shooting, where an armed citizen took down the bad guy? That guy was just an armed citizen, did a hell of a lot more than any of these cops did in Broward County. This is insanity. And I'll tell you something that's even more insane. Hey, here's something that's even more insane. Again, remember, just a couple of days ago, it was this schmuck, Steve Israel, who was standing on stage amidst a bunch of the citizens from Broward County and shouting at Dana Lash and telling Dana Lash that it was her fault that all of this had happened, that it was the NRA's fault that all of this has happened, virtue signaling and posturing about how we just need to get guns out of the hands of bad people. Well, the guns were in the hands of the right people, but they didn't do a damn thing, according to CNN. This is the worst law enforcement failure in modern American history. 17 dead people because there were cops waiting outside who didn't go in there. So I ripped on the CNN special because I thought that it was an emotional setup. It was specifically designed to destroy the proponents of Second Amendment rights. It was, I thought, disreputable. I thought it had no news value. It was just 2 minutes of hate. It was Orwell's 2 minutes hate. Okay, but here's what makes it even worse. While Israel was doing this, there were questions, right? Because all this came out this morning. There were questions that came out over the last couple days about what Israel knew and when he knew it. Because now we know he's admitting it full on that he had a deputy there who didn't pull his gun and didn't go inside. And now we're finding out from CNN there were 3 more deputies. So the question is, when did he know that? Did he only find out about that after he ripped Dana Lash to shreds, and after he ripped the NRA to shreds, and after he blamed Second Amendment proponents for what happened? Or did he know that while he was on that stage, and is he such a dishonest piece of human debris, that he went on that stage and blamed everybody but himself when he's the guy in power, he's the guy with the star on his chest? He's the man responsible for taking care of those kids. That is his duty. That is his job. That is what he was hired to do. That is what he's paid to do. That's what he'll get his pension from. And that guy was standing there. So when did he know it? Well, fortunately for us, CNN reports. This isn't me reporting it. In Daily Wire reporting it. In a right-wing piece of news media reporting it. Ain't Fox News. This is CNN. Okay, according to Coral Springs City Manager Mike Goodrum, on February 15th, the day after the shooting, this is a direct quote from CNN, the Coral City Springs city manager, chewed out Steve Israel over that malfeasance on February 15th. He approached him the day after the shooting and he said, "My people told me that they got there and your people were outside doing nothing." Which means that not only did Israel probably know it, he was informed of it directly by somebody else. And then a week later, he went on national television and ripped somebody who had nothing to do with it and blamed them for the problem. How disgusting is that? How repulsive is that? I mean, that is just the level of moral despicability necessary to do that is just astonishing. So 2 levels of absolute degradation, moral degradation. 1, 4 police officers waiting outside while kids get mowed down. 1 guy inside with a gun. 4 people outside with guns. That's level number 1, which is the worst. And then level number 2 is the cover-up, where you blame everybody but yourself when you're the one responsible for it. Absolutely horrifying. Absolutely horrifying in every possible way. Now, what have the media done about this? Well, the media, of course, have continued to blame the NRA. The media have continued to suggest that it's gun owners, Second Amendment advocates everywhere who are doing all of this. You know, President Trump said today, he was speaking at CPAC, and President Trump said today that the Second Amendment was under threat. And Jesse Singal, a guy who I'm friendly with from formerly of New York Magazine, he and I got into it on Twitter because he said, what kind of nonsense is that the Second Amendment is under threat? Well, that same Steve Israel was on stage calling for a full ban on semi-automatic rifles, which is any working rifle in the United States that's not a bolt-action or a lever-action rifle or a muzzle-loaded rifle. Right, so basically they're calling for a vast ban on the most common guns in the United States and then telling us that's not a violation of the Second Amendment and we're supposed to feel comfortable with this. You roll out a 24/7 propaganda effort by the news media to say that guns are responsible for something where it's pretty clear the authorities didn't do their job, and I'm supposed to feel comfortable with you guys? So here's the case you're making to me, Steve Israel. Here's the case you're making to me, Barack Obama. Here's the case you're making to me, all the folks in the media on the left. Okay, the case that you're making to me today is the FBI failed twice to do anything about this school shooter. And then the Broward County Sheriff's Office failed 39 times to do anything about that shooter. And then there were armed people from the Broward County Sheriff's Office there, 4 of them apparently, and they didn't do anything about the shooter. And I'm supposed to hand over my gun to you? I'm supposed to hand over my ability to defend myself to you? Why in blue blazing hell would I do that? Why would I hand over my only ability to protect myself to people who are going to stand outside with the guns that I gave up and not rush the shooter? Again, the people in the media are just, it's Scott Israel, not Steve Israel, rather. The people in the people in the media have been attempting to spin away from this story all day. Now it's even worse, obviously, because it's not just one officer, it's four. The way they've been spinning away from this, so Lawrence O'Donnell was the worst. Lawrence O'Donnell last night goes on TV and he says, how can you expect one man to charge into the line of fire, even if he's wearing a uniform? I love these same people who say that the cops are racists, the cops are pathetic, we shouldn't trust the cops, we can never trust the cops, and now all of a sudden they're the big defenders of cops. They only like cops when cops don't actually do anything, apparently. So this cop didn't run in, he didn't do anything. So Lawrence O'Donnell says, you know why he didn't do that? Because the muzzle velocity of a rifle is 3 times the muzzle velocity of a handgun. So the officer's gun had a lower muzzle velocity than the shooter's rifle. Do you have any idea how ridiculously stupid this is? This defense? So is the idea that this guy would be able to avoid a fired bullet from a handgun? Does he have Matrix-like ability? As soon as he picks up an AR, suddenly he can bend over backwards like Keanu Reeves and make sound waves in the air behind the bullet? Is that the idea here? Let's say they're standing 100 feet apart. We'll do a quick back-of-the-envelope math here. A typical rifle fires about 3,900 feet per second. That's the muzzle velocity, is about 3,900 feet per second. A typical handgun is about 1,300 feet per second. Let's say they were standing 100 feet from one another. Let's say that he ran into the hallway and they're standing 100 feet from one another. That means that if they fired the bullets simultaneously, the bullet fired from the rifle would hit approximately 5/100ths of a second before the bullet fired from the handgun. Are you telling me it's purely impossible for that officer to get in there and have a 5/100ths of a second advantage? Because it's not even fast enough for you to blink your eyes. Okay, you literally would not even see that. Okay, that's how fast it is. And yet we're told that this is the deciding factor, or that we have to have tremendous sympathy for this officer. Again, I wouldn't want to be in that position as an officer, but that's why I didn't sign up to be an officer. And if I had a gun as a civilian, I hope that I would have the balls to rush in there and try to do something. But if you're going to make the case that the government should have the only authority to stop mass shooters, if you're trying to make the case that we shouldn't arm teachers or we shouldn't arm private security guards or that citizens shouldn't be armed, you're going to have to do better than that.